Are you that fancy yet?
The thing is, I was going to get a fancy intro and everything, and then decided not to because what I find is each episode I do, depending on the episode that I'm doing, if I just use soca music, which is the music that we produce,
Mm-hmm.
I just use intros from different soca music songs, and it's kind of like set induction, so it gets the audience thinking about the theme based on the song that I'm using. So it's like a huge game now for the audience. They like to think
Mm-hmm.
to what song is she gonna choose.
Yeah.
So this is the one I chose for our session today. Hi folks, how y'all doing?
I'm trying to hear the lyrics so I can
I'll
say
send the
in
link
a
for
way that
you. I'll send the link for you afterwards so that you can hear it. And um, if you're not understanding everything, I'll talk you through what is being said in the song. But so what he said thus far is bad mind. I don't know who sent you for me, but tell them you don't see
yeah.
me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he goes on in the song to talk about how he's alive and well. Thank God he's alive and well. And
Yeah.
envious people can't get at him. Wicked people can't get at him. Um,
Nice.
and oh gosh, he talks about no bad company could ever take away his peace of mind, that kind of stuff. That's what he
Mm.
says. So I'll send a link for you
I
so that
see
you.
it. I see the theme. I get it now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It
yeah, yeah.
works.
I'm glad that you see the theme and that you get it. Um, so it's one of our younger soca artists, and he actually sings the song with a choir. Hi, folks. Good
Nice.
evening. Usually the guest is off screen before all of this happens, but he was on screen. We were doing the audiovisual test. I was playing the song for him, and it was time for me to start. So, good evening, and thank you, all of you that are here right now, and the others that are going to be joining in a little bit. Oh, JP is on the he's on the live.
JP.
So
I'm not
he
supposed to be doing any of this. I let me go behind my curtain. I need to go back. I can
So
emerge once
I don't
my
know if this
time.
means I don't know if this means the pressure is on because GP has shown up, but I'm just letting you know that he's
Oh
here,
no.
and he's like let's
I just
go.
love I love him.
So
I wish we
I
were in person.
you wish what? Sorry.
We were in person. I haven't seen JP in years. I wish we were having this conversation in person.
Actually, you know what we can do eventually? We can do one where we can do a live where it's you and JP, and
True.
we having the conversation. So I mean, let's see how this goes. Let's see if you pass muster this evening.
Now I'm nervous. I was nervous till you just
Let
said
me see
that.
if you pass muster this evening because JP has a huge fan club amongst my followers. They love him to death. They message me like, when are you bringing him back? When is he coming back? So, folks, let me introduce you to my guest properly. He is a therapist, he's a thinker, he's also a drummer, and he does a lot of work with mental health advocacy and restorative justice. And more importantly, he was recommended to me by JP Collier. So I want to introduce you to Dr. Obari Cartman, and we are going to be talking about black um, mental health, mental wellness this evening. So, Obari, welcome, and thank you so much for
Thank you.
agreeing to doing this interview with me. I want to ask
I
you.
appreciate it.
Oh, no problem at all. No problem at all. So I want to ask this. When you talk about self care, or when you are discussing
Mhm.
self care, what do you mean when you are talking about self care?
I'm gonna start and from the inspiration of the song you chose.
Sure.
Um, because when you start reading those lyrics, it resonated with me the importance of doing this in a way that is contextual.
Okay.
The self care conversation, particularly in America, has a very individualistic viewpoint. So
Mm-hmm.
you think about just making sure you feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when I think about self care in an expanded way and consistent with the notion of the self as a member of a community, as
Mm-hmm.
integrated into a larger body, that self care has to consider the community's well being and it has to consider the opposition to well-being that we always are up against. So when the artist in the beginning was talking about, send them to me, like I'm good, I'll be protected. There's an intrinsic understanding that I can't, as a therapist, just go give deep breathing skills and help people learn how to make good decisions and then go, pat myself on the back and just go home, because
Right.
there's always going to be something attempting to unravel the well-being that we achieve. In this place that, as we talk in Black folk around the diaspora, we are up against constant opposition to our ability to self care, to see ourselves as worthy, as deserving of care, and finding ways to integrate true wellness into like our daily rituals. And so for me, it's that. For me, it's an act of warfare,
Right.
right? For me, it's political, it's community, it's comprehensive, it's contextual, and at the surface, it looks like getting massages and doing yoga and getting manicures, but underneath that, there's a sense of reconnecting yourself to yourself as a result of, y'all been talking about intergenerational trauma, ancestral trauma, as a result against a psychic onslaught against our people, that we are rebuilding and restoring and reintegrating ourselves into those things that we didn't lose over time, but like were taken from us. And so self care is all of that for me.
Okay.
It's not simple. It's not
So I'm
superficial. It's really a deep investigation into um, you know beingness in the world.
right. So I'm seeing just some just from that original first statement from you. You're looking at that tension between the individual and the community, and how
Mm,
you strike that balance in a
sure.
culture that might be individualistic as well, and then
Yeah.
attempting to practice things that require community and a sort of communal approach. Am I
Yeah. I mean, so part of it is the approach. Part of it is the conceptualization of being. So the word self is never for me in my cultural context about me by myself. Myself in isolation is defined by my relationships. And so if you read my bio, like I start by my role as a father. That's who
yes,
I am. So
yes.
I am me, but I'm also a son. I'm also a grandson. I'm an uncle I am, and I define my beingness in the context of my relationships and my roles in my community.
Right,
There is no self separate from any of that.
right,
So I can't even consider self care without that. And it's not even attention. It's really just like a fundamental understanding of who I am on the planet.
right. So in looking after
That self,
yourself, you have to look after your
yeah.
relationships. Is that is that a fair assessment to make? That you have to look after these various relationships that you have, because in
That's part of it.
if
Yeah.
you're a father, that's a relationship, that's a
Hmm.
connection. If you are a brother,
Yeah.
that's a relationship, that's a connection. Because for me to be a
Hmm.
sister, there has to be a sibling. For me to be a
Yeah.
daughter,
Yeah.
there has to be a parent. For me to be a mother, there
Hmm.
has to be a child. And if I'm navigating all of those different roles, then I'm looking at the ways in which I'm maintaining those relationships. Yeah?
That's a part of it for sure.
Okay.
That's a
All right.
part of it.
Okay, good. So you're
Yeah.
talking about being and how
Hmm.
you navigate your being in the world. So tell me, how do you navigate your being in the world?
Um, Part of it is really spending time understanding that there's a level of misalignment that my beingness has with just like the cycles of life as a result of the traumas I've experienced and the traumas we as a collective have experienced. And a lot of what my beingness, my attempts to like be my best self have a lot to do with yielding and submission and humbling myself to like to the flow of the cycles of life,
Right.
my ancestors' rebirth cycles into the cycles of my children's rebirth.
Right.
Um, the cycles of the sun, moon, and stars, like just the Earth's equilibrium. So my beingness is connected to all of these things.
Right.
Um, to be well has to do with being in sync with all of these sort of interlapping, dynamic, evolving sort of ideas and manifestations of other life beings. That my beingness is connected to all of this. So it's the interconnectedness is
Right.
the center of what I consider my beingness. And to figure that out has to do with, as we talked about, being in relationship and honoring the value of those, but also just like submitting to the beauty of the collective. I
Okay.
feel most powerful when I'm in group. I feel
Okay.
most well, most balanced when I'm um, in alignment with the people around me, my children, my parents, my ancestors, my community. Like when I feel like I'm serving, when I'm contributing something valuable, that's when my beingness is able to operate at its highest sort of vibration, if you will.
In some of the work that you've done, because I was looking at a number of YouTube videos where you were speaking and you'd been invited to be a speaker. You talked about
Yeah.
trying to fit into a culture. I mean, this is me paraphrasing using my own language here.
Oh,
Trying to fit into a culture in which you are misaligned, like you don't belong in the
mhm.
culture. If you can speak a little to why this culture is a culture that you're not aligned into.
Um, well, I'm in the United States, and so like even psychology, for example, we were talking about. I met JP in grad school. We went to school together, and that process by itself, like we are attempting to be healers and to servants to the community, and in the process of becoming a psychologist, there's trauma embedded in the process of learning the material, right? So I'm looking, reading through the books that they're assigning, and I don't see myself or my community or my ancestral traditions or anything of value to the work that I know is needed in my community. And so that misalignment happens at every level of this. So like we having this conversation in English because I've been disconnected from like the tongue of my ancestors. My last name, I'm looking at my last name on the screen. It's a badge of shame for me to still have to say a silent prayer to the ancestors of my enemies, right? So like all of it, it's a complete total misalignment because the ways European culture has inundated our world being. Like I can't look up at the sky and see stars without naming the constellation Sagittarius. Like the names of the months, the names of the days are all like homages to Greek and Roman gods, counting the days and years based on the Roman calendar. My address is on Jefferson Street. I can't go home without thinking about Thomas Jefferson. Anytime I turn open money, there's Washington's in the money. Everywhere I look, everywhere I turn, there's a
A
a
reminder.
misalignment.
All right, a
There's a
misalignment and a
reminder.
reminder. So I want to
Yeah,
say this. We're all living in we're all living in spaces that were once formerly colonized, right? I mean,
for sure.
in some form or fashion, the argument is that it's no longer colonized, but I think that colonization is
Mhm.
an ongoing process and it really hasn't ended in many of these
Mhm.
spaces. So this is where we are, this is where we're living. You are in the United States, I'm in the Caribbean, and there's
Yeah,
been that meeting of cultures, right? And a violent meeting of cultures at that. When you're
yeah.
looking at European persons and persons of African descent. So
Yeah.
how do we navigate being? How do we navigate having a self and caring for that self in a space where we will
Hmm.
constantly have to have that tension between cultures?
Yeah. I think it's important to isolate to create safe space where I can play the game. I go to school. I got the degrees. Sometimes you got to go to work and play the licenses games and the credential games for compensation and for capitalism is inundated also in all of these systems. So
On.
to feed my children, there's sometimes I got to make these compromises to be able to eat and pay rent. And I need to make sure that I know that there's a part of my day or week or month, there's some time when I need to protect the space where I can have a reprieve from that game, from those compromises. And there are other ways that we can sort of do it gradually. The spook was. Are you okay? Did you just
I swallowed badly. Sorry. I think I should be fine now. Good. I'm so
okay?
sorry about that.
Self care also includes drinking slowly and breathing deeply.
Yes.
Um, so I mean, I think we have to create space within systems and institutions where we are. We got to push back and declare ourselves and find ways to integrate those things that we know are whole and healing authentically. And we got to find spaces where we just do it on our own, where
But
just black
how
folk gather.
how do you
Go ahead.
create that space in, I mean, I'm looking at your context in the United States. where there seems to be
Yeah.
so much that's stacked against the black
Hmm.
community.
Hmm.
In the Caribbean, the the dynamics and the demographics are a little bit different. I'm not going to say that it's significantly different. It's a little bit different,
Hmm.
but in
Yeah.
in a space that was not really established for you, not really created
Hmm.
for you, that has always ever been hostile in a sense, and there's so many institutions created with a view to keeping you out. Really, how do you go
Hmm.
about
Hmm.
creating space?
So I went to a school. A lot of what I learned came from being a part of institutions that were doing exactly what you're describing,
Right.
where they say there's a public school system, there's a magnet school, whatever it is, but we are going to get together, parents, educators, and create a school to teach our children our history, our culture. We wore red, black, and green flags. We learned about Marcus Garvey. We played African drums, and that was the beginning of what education meant for me. We celebrated Kwanzaa. We were in a house where there was, Black African cultural heritage sort of celebrations everywhere I went. So in the world is saying Africa is backwards and primitive, and I go to school and they call me an African booty scratcher, and I'm like, that I can hear that, but not get impacted by it because at home there's this protected space. In my community, there's this encouragement, there's this celebration of this thing that the world is saying is stupid or ugly or dumb or whatever it is. But I'm like, no, no, you stupid, because you don't know what I know, because my parents, my community gave me this safe space to be able to build this understanding in me. I think we need to create these institutions. We need to just create the space, and it might not have to be every day. It could be, we used to do Saturday schools. Other ethnicities protect their language in ways that we don't. Other people celebrate their culture in ways that we don't. We've kind of given it away. And integration in the United States for us meant redefining what success and wellness meant based on somebody else's sort of paradigm. We kind of folded ourselves into that. But I think we can slowly extract ourselves and at least have moments of time when I use my name as an example. So the Cartman is my last name, and
Right.
I can trace that history back. But Obari was the name that my parents said, I'm going to go through a book of African names and find something that's meaningful to me. And I don't know if this is the ethnic group that he belonged to, but I want to make sure that he has a reminder every time he says his first name that we are declaring something different than what America has given to us.
So what does
So it's
Obari
all of
mean?
it. I've heard a couple different things, but of God,
Okay.
the highest. Those it's a reference to supreme being in some ways.
Okay.
I got another name. I went through an initiation for an African spiritual system called Ifa, where I got the name Adeye. And so in that system, there were African people, Black people that said, "What do we believe before Christianity? There had to be something that we understood. Let's go study that, restore that, bring back those rituals." In the midst of Chicago, right here, we got downtown, and there's politics and there's police, and we complain about that, and we do complain about that and push against that, and at the same time, we spend time just doing our thing, just remembering our songs, remembering our language, rebuilding those rituals. And I think if the more we do that, the less we have to like even contend with what does it mean to be under attack and in misalignment, because we so focused on just building our stuff that like it becomes an afterthought. And
Right.
so I think we can. I think it's just like intention and courage and study and collaborative work and organization. I think that we've been doing that for a long time. I think we just kind of lost some of it.
So you also been talking about the importance of creating, I guess, separate or underground spaces. So let's say you had the opportunity
Right.
to create this
Hmm.
separate underground space. So I had the idea to take on board what you're saying and create this separate
Yeah.
underground space. Talk me through as if you are an architect and I need to learn from you. How do I go
Hmm.
about creating or setting up this separate underground space? And I'm asking it with a view to persons who are on here, they're listening, and they might be interested in beginning to create these safe
Hmm.
spaces for themselves.
Hmm. Um, I think it's really important to follow your intuition around what it means to create a safe space that is particular to the needs of your community. Um, and in doing so, there's we can have blueprints. The architect example is really good. There's blueprints that we have, and I've read a lot of books, and even studying stuff around what happened pre-colonial Africa in terms of the rituals and the principles and values. Like some of that stuff, I learn and I look at, and what I want to do is take the best of that or extract from that what I think is useful and meaningful that I can apply in practical ways to my scenario on the south side of Chicago. And so what it looks like at the end, it depends. Like it's a communal process. It's a process that requires tapping into, ancestral traditions where you get to part of it is be silent and listen and look for guidance in ways that aren't necessarily in books or on TV, or we got influencers now that we look for guidance from. But part of that guidance has to come from us. This we have a generation that I'm really nervous about that is not able to sit still long enough to hear those things that would give that vision for what a space that your community or family needs. Some of that just has to come from the inside. And so, but we what we need to do is protect that space, create meditative, silent, sort of sacred space where we can just sit still, listen to our spirit guides, listen to ourself, our own intuition, and look for those clues to say, okay, no, this is where you start, and then start just real small, like just build one piece at a time. Just start one little nugget, one little seed, and then those things grow organically, and then you just have what you need based on the community's insight and wisdom from deciding just to do it. I think deciding to do it is the hardest part.
Perhaps, but
Figuring out
then
how
then
or what.
how do you tune out the noise? And I'm asking that with a
Mhm,
view to,
mhm.
you may want to do it, but then you're also
Yeah,
torn by, you're part of this mainstream culture, right? And
sure.
you want to be accepted, and you're not
Yeah.
yet sure about how exactly to tune out the noise. So how do you tune out that noise?
It takes courage for. I mean, the mainstream culture is designed to be alluring. It's shiny and it compensates you for submitting to it. So part of it is sacrifice. Part of it is deciding that the trinkets of the mainstream are not worth the the trauma, right, that comes with it. And so at a certain point, everybody gets to a place where you just decide that I've had enough of this, and you go in different directions from that. You start fighting it, or you want to change it, or you want to disconnect from it and create something new. But you got to get there's a point though, and so part of that point requires even your own introspection into what is good for you, what's healthy. So, the mainstream is shiny and it's pretty and it pays you, but like, are you well for real? And we can define that once we have the space to have the conversation. That's why I love when people like you decide to create platforms to have the conversation. Because the conversation is the beginning of it. Because then you got your wheels turning. You're thinking like, no, I hadn't thought about that. That's real. That's interesting. And now I'll go sleep on it. And now I wake up and there's this nagging thought. And then I can either ignore it, or I could attune myself. I could give it its just due and allow it to sort of become what it's supposed to become. But that's work, though. I mean, you're right. Like it's the
It is.
distractions will come,
It is
the
work.
noise, the cacophony, the distraction. I mean, it's always going to come. There has to come a point when there's a discipline, there's courage, there's sacrifice, and there's a willpower that you connect to that thing that you want. And then you begin to listen, and then gradually you just allow yourself to submit to that and let it take you where it's going to take you.
For me, one of the biggest challenges has to be mainstream media. If that's where
Yeah,
you're getting your news, your information, your
yeah,
entertainment, and given the way
yeah,
mainstream media is shaped and fashioned, you know, making that decision to unplug from mainstream media and to move away from
yeah.
mainstream, that's a huge challenge. So within your
Sure.
practice, how do you tackle those things, or what do you suggest as solutions, I guess, for the folks that you are practicing this kind of being with?
For me, the beginning of it is defining a standard of principles of what wellness even is at the end. Like, what do we want? What are we looking for? Joy, peace of mind, rest, productivity, community. Like, there's some simple, basic things that we want. And once I have that established and we all agree to that, now I can go to mainstream media and look at it with a critical eye and say, are these things represented in a way that feels good to you? Before you were just like going through it. COVID, I think, helped with that. Before there's just a rat race. We just move in. We're not even thinking about it. We eat, not even tasting it. We just throwing stuff down our mouth, going to sleep, right, and going right back to it. Like we just moving and moving. And then COVID happened. We all got to take a break. We all had to sit down for a moment and sit still and reevaluate and look at it. And I think we can teach that as a skill. One, to stop for a moment, be still, reflect, breathe, and just listen to yourself. But then also look around, look at the neighborhood. What do you see? Do you see things that are affirming, that are good for you? Do you want your children to grow up in this? Is this the standard of beauty or of excellence or of intelligence that you want to pass down? And then once you get there, you can say, okay, well, maybe not. So then what would it be? So do you need to create that for yourself? Do we need to challenge that image or those ideas? One of the things that I appreciated about the COVID year was that the power of the media, at least in America, the power of the government weakened some, and then they knew what was happening because CDC would come out with a report and they say this is what it is, and then the next day they would contradict themselves. And we not stupid. Like we were like, okay, they don't know what they're doing right now, which is scary, but it's refreshing because it's like it means that we really all we got for
Because
real.
it lifts the
I can't.
veil. It lifts the veil. You
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of you have
yeah,
the
absolutely.
opportunity to see who the Wizard of Oz is and realize that the Wizard of
Absolutely.
Oz is um
Yeah,
is all made up, really.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
So when
what?
you do that, you're like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, I have to figure this out on my own. I got to figure out what's beautiful, what's sound, what's entertainment, what's fun. They say this is entertainment and this is popular, but then I get to pause and say, wait, is that fun for me? Do I actually enjoy that? Is this what I want? These are like questions that we just need to encourage ourselves to ask, and then create the space to do it. Have the conversations, and then from that, I genuinely believe the wisdom of the collective will reveal itself, and at that point, you just got to decide to move on it.
So when you were thinking about your idea of, I guess, balance and well-being, how do you define it for yourself?
Um, for me, it's an ongoing question, and I think that's the beauty of it. Is that it's not a destination. You don't get to a place where, okay, I figured this out now, because everything is you're on terrain is constantly moving. And so it's a daily question. It's a daily tapping in, and the way I do it is to just be constantly aware of like how I'm feeling, what's happening in my body, in my mind, and my emotions. I teach a lot of emotional intelligence to men, and it's hard because men aren't connected to their own body. When you think about self knowledge, like know thyself,
Why are
begins
men
with just being
why are
still.
men so much less connected to their bodies? And I'm asking this especially
Hmm.
since, in my experience, I see men grabbing their bodies and the bodies of others more often
Yeah.
than women grab their bodies. And, because women don't really
Hmm.
walk around touching themselves in the exact same way that men
Hmm.
do.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
there is a disconnect, I think, between men and their bodies. So, why is there
Yeah.
that degree of disconnect?
I agree. I think we touch the outside of our bodies more. I don't think we touch the inside of our bodies as much.
Okay.
And maybe touch the outside of our bodies and other people's bodies to distract ourselves from what we feel on the inside. And a
What do
lot of
you.
times on the inside, that is discomfort, it's pain,
And
it's
this
grief, it's
discomfort,
sadness,
why?
it's
Discomfort, why?
I
Or
think the
discomfort,
why
how?
is
Discomfort, how?
I think it's it's just regular human discomfort. I think it's just life is tough. It's got you get bumped and bruised and dinged up, and there's no way to live this thing without coming away with some scars. So I think that's a human thing. And I think that men are disconnected from the ability to be able to recognize that, give ourselves permission to feel that, have the courage and discipline to withstand the discomfort and the pain of that, to resolve it. I think that we're easier to smoke it away, drink it away, sex it away, to money it away, to violence it away. I don't think that we have the same internal fortitude. And I think that's cultivated. I think over time you just develop the sense that you sit with it for a little bit. I don't think that a lot of men have the courage to sit with their pain, call it that, figure out what if it's grief, if it's sadness, if it's embarrassment, if it's shame, to label it, to have this, this understanding of it, this sort of complex emotional. And when we do it, we label it women stuff. We say when I cry, I'm getting in touch with my feminine side. So now I got to go outside of myself to go into something else that I've already been perceived of as weaker, right? So then to all these barriers to just sitting still and recognizing that when I my heart beat fast or my shoulders get tense or my leg is shaking, that there's an emotional connection to that something happened, and that I need to go back and understand that, process it, unpack it, address it, go have a conversation, let something go, whatever it is that I need to do to resolve that emotion. We miss the whole thing because we skipped the first part, which is to just feel it and be honest about it. Um, whether you say something out loud about to another man or another woman or not, just be honest with yourself about it, and then you could journal it or you could just be aware of it. But we missed that first part, just to
Yeah, but
sit still,
men don't
feel
do a
it.
lot of that. They don't do a lot of sitting still. They're not really much
Right.
into journaling,
Hmm.
sharing thoughts, feelings,
Right.
emotions. I mean, there's certain kinds of thoughts I think they're comfortable sharing. But then when you start when you start pushing for explanations or descriptions of emotion, that's not necessarily something they're cool at doing. So
Hmm.
how do you, in your practice, how do you get men to begin to tap into their own emotional intelligence?
So one thing I think is important to remember is that we are different. We're very similar in lots of ways, but there are ways we're different. Whether it's biological or socialized, we turn out to be different types of beings. We move around the world differently, and so there are times when I think that men are communicating and being very emotional, and it doesn't look the same as it would if it were a woman.
Okay.
So there are ways in which sports is my favorite example of looking for emotional connection and expression and variance and diversity in men. Strong, big, tall, successful men. You'll see them cry. You see them get angry. You see them get frustrated. Like you see the whole range of things on the court. And then but then it becomes a box though. So as soon as they leave the court, it all washes away and they go into the stoic posturing of like, no, I'm cool, I'm okay. And the only expression we get permission to feel and express is anger. So we end up masking all the other things through anger. You see anger, but it's really sadness and it's really grief and it's all this other stuff. But um, we need to help our young men see older men go through these emotional sort of experiences publicly, make it look appealing, connected to the things that are a part of male culture. So if it's sports, or I use hip hop a lot, or I use drums. So if I say, "Come on, guys, let's go talk about your feelings," like there's a disconnect. But if I can play a song where there's an artist that they're into that's talking about losing their homies and popping X's because they can't sleep at night, I'm like, man, what do you think that's about? You ever had that experience? And then they would talk about it. I don't call it therapy. I won't say emotional intelligence. I won't even use these words. I would say no, keep it a buck. Like keep it on it. Like just tell me, just be honest. I will start by doing that myself, create a precedent, right? Model it, lead it, um, have them know that there are other men that do that. It's a way to change this culture, but all of it got to be intentional. We have to again create separate space where we as men are doing it on our own, where there's an intergenerational space where they see older men doing it, where younger men are challenging the older man to go deeper. Like all these things can happen with the intention, with the safety, with the trust. And I think there's something special about doing it in a way that is cool, that is masculine, if you will, that is incorporating the things that men do already with video games, whether it's food, whatever it is. We sitting there on grilling, playing sports, pause, sit down, and be like, no, I mean, how you been for real? Like, tell me about that.
So
There's a lot going on.
who's the hip hop artist you're into these days?
Um, what do I like? Coda the Friend, New York artist. I've been listening to him. Uh, for the young folks, there's a lot of artists that I'm really impressed with their emotional like intelligence.
Yeah.
Polo G, G Herbo, NBA YoungBoy. Um, what's the guy? I really like this one guy. I can't think of his name right now. NLE Choppa.
Okay.
Um, some young guys that are really like putting music out there that's just changing the game in ways that I'm extremely impressed by. But I
Oh,
still listen to a lot of
yeah.
old stuff too.
Okay. And when you use their music, what are the
Hmm.
conversations that are, I guess, that are popping up when you use their music in your therapy?
That men are in a lot of pain. that we cover a lot, that we hold a lot, that there's a lot of burdens, that there's a lot of grief and loss, that there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of disappointment, a lot of neglect, like all the human stuff, like all the worst things that you could imagine in a community that's been compounded with poverty and trauma. Like all those things show up, addiction and lack of worth and depression. All those things show up, and I have found that they're ready to talk about it. They were just waiting for somebody to ask. They were just waiting for a circle, a space to for where they can say, okay, finally, I can like say this out loud. The other part of it is having the broader conversation about the contextual trauma, so I can remove the shame of you feeling this difficult emotion, so that the sadness or the anger or whatever the trauma response is, it isn't your fault. Like I can say, I do a lot of work in prisons, and they expect me to go into the prison and help the young boys come out and make new decisions and to like play they cards better, and pull their pants up and go to school. Like they want me to help their individual process, but I
Right.
always start with the systemic attack, and I lead with that, because otherwise there's a sense that like we broken inherently, there's something wrong with us. All black people are in pain because we violent. So I got to remove that by saying this is what happened to our community. This is what attack look like. This is what ongoing attack still looks like. And we've been pointing to the police because of Black Lives Matter, but all these systems are complicit. The schools, the prisons that you're in right now, they're profiting off of the pain, the media, the food. Like I can point to all the ways that you so powerful that you got systems that are using their infrastructure and resources to hold you in place, and they're winning because we haven't had the conversation to tune you into it yet. And so then I remove that
Yeah.
shame of like something wrong with me. So after that they're able to be like, man, you're right. That system did ding me in this very particular way, and this is that story that I never got to share, and that's what made me make the decision to end up in here. So you got to trace these threads, but it begins with just setting the attention and creating enough space to not be feeling like they gonna be diagnosed again or told that they're wrong again, because they've been hearing that their whole life. So we got to come with a different approach to say, no, I see you, bro. Like I know what you've been through. This is what happened that you didn't even know about. Now let's talk about what that's meant for you.
I found that a lot of the justice system, certainly in the criminal justice
Hmm.
system, there is a focus on the individual being wrong, right? The
Right.
individual having done bad things and the individual um, being dysfunctional without
Hmm.
us really explaining to the individual what are the things that would have contributed and led to the dysfunction that they find themselves in.
Hmm.
So when you start having these conversations with young men about what has led to their dysfunction, how, because I mean, you can't hold their hand the entire way. You're there, you're doing work
Hmm.
with them, yes, but they also have to start to
For
feel their
sure.
way their way through. How do they
Yeah.
then begin the hard work of unpacking things around them, unpacking
Mhm.
the things that they have to unpack, and then figuring out the other things, navigating these
Yeah.
systems that have led to their dysfunction.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we got to be more organized. Because I'm often a temporary moment in their life, whether it's a couple of weeks or whether it's one moment, whatever it is. And so I get a moment to drop a seed and sort of hope that it gets planted. But then I have to trust that they're going to go out into the world and interact with somebody else that's going to water it, that's going to cultivate it, that's going to give it some sunshine. And if we are more organized, and if we connected across the Caribbean, across the diet, if we are more organized with the folk that have like minds and clear vision, then we can send folk places. And so that it's not just about navigating the system, it's about changing the system that they're navigating moment by moment, institution by institution, because we are having conversations about what it means to transform not just the person, but the community and the spaces that they interact with. But that's the hard part. Like I don't often see the fruit, right? I often just I trust and I hope and I pray that I planted the best damn seed I could, but then I don't see them again often.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, we know what happens, and they go and what I say might be special. Nobody else has said nothing like them to them before or after me, and so then the seed just dies, right? But if we had better systems, we were more organized, and if we were really doing the work of like reach and impact and infiltration, those kind of things, or creating separate spaces, then um, everybody would be touched. by these messages, these ideas in different places.
So then, what kind of networking are you involved in thus far? Then.
So in Chicago, I am the president of the Chicago Association of Black Psychologists, which is a national organization that has international chapters. So that's one body. It's a bunch of healers and social workers. There's a Black Social Worker Association too. I'm connected with Susan Taylor's National Cares Mentoring Organization. I'm the program director in Chicago for an organization called Real Men Charities that has some chapters in different places. I'm big on organizations. There's a lot of pressure for this generation to like brand your own stuff, do your own LLC, and then just like
Why are you big on
make your space
organizations? What?
be the
Why do
brand.
you see organizations as useful?
I think that we did not get into this trouble because of any one moment or movement or person. I believe that the trauma was caused by organization. And it took the media to connect with the politics, with the Navy and the Army and the food distributors. Like they all work together. They are in cahoots. So we got enemies that are organized. And so we have to at least be as organized as the people that are intent on maintaining the system. Like we have to be more organized if we're going to try to change it or protect ourselves. And so the artists and the healers and the educators, we got to be connected to each other in these networks, because part of the trauma that I'm seeing in Chicago has to do with chaos, right? The violence and the disorganization and people making up what they want day by day, not having family structure or community structure. It just creates a wildness. It's a wild wild west, kind of like anything goes. We can make up what a man means from a moment, what wellness means, what success means. We just making it up as we go along because there's no structure. So I think the structure would help with the transmission of culture, protecting ourselves, and also combating the systems that are in place that are profiting off of our pain. All of that's going to take much more organization than we have.
Drumming. Talk to me about you and drumming and your use of drumming.
Drumming. So I grew up drumming, and for me, it was just a part of the cultural expression of the house, and it became a part of my therapy as I thought about several things. One, the therapeutic impact it has on me. Like when I drum, it gives me a space to go into a meditative zone, almost a trance-like state where I can let things go easier. I can listen more clearly. Um, there's something about rhythm. Everything runs on rhythm. The circadian rhythms of our dreams, our heartbeat is on rhythm. We spinning and circling all at the same time while we having this conversation. So like there's this natural cycle of rhythms that the drums allow us to connect to. And so if I'm in a circle with a bunch of, brothers or sisters and I just put a bunch of drums out, the thing I love to do the most is to just not even teach, right? I'll start a circle, put the drums out, have instruments, bells, shake and raise, whatever it is, and I'll just start a beat. I won't say a word, I'll just start a beat. And somebody will pick up a stick or grab a drum and we'll just find something that fits that. And then somebody else will say, oh, okay, and then you start moving and swaying. We get to have a conversation without even talking, and the what's powerful about that is I spoke earlier about like the vestige of trauma in my tongue. I dream in English. Like my most intimate thoughts and words to my son is in the tongue of my oppressor. Like so, if I can remove that barrier for a moment, at least for a moment, and enter a zone where I can sort of create a portal that honors our ancestors who there was vicious attempts to disconnect the drums from us. So there was a moment in our history where if you were caught drumming, you get your arms cut off. You could get, punished viciously. You might die for drumming. Reading these things that were illegal because an enemy knew the power in the drums and in our rituals and in our chanting and our language. There was medicine in these things, which is why they had to remove them from us if they wanted to keep us subservient. And so when I think about healing, it's got to be reconnecting to those things that have gotten us through centuries of like building civilizations and families and the things that we maintained to have our own balance despite ups and downs of civilizations for thousands of years before the disruption. All of those things came with rituals. For me, drums is my connection to those.
Right.
Um, and so when I do healing work, I want to reconnect us to those things as a way to honor those ancestors, but also to tap into the frequency, the vibration, the rhythm that is about a oneness. And it happens, when I start with the drums, but the reason I do drums is to show us what the conversation is meant for. So in the same way that I'll just put a bunch of drums out and then we just start talking and you put your own little spice and then you put your own little shake thing and then your body moving and then we all in and then we find this sort of common rhythm. Then when we stop drumming, I attempt to do that. My intention is to do that with conversation. So I put out a topic like family or like grief or like protecting black women or like dealing with politics, Black Lives Matter, and then there might be different voices, just like the drum beats. Somebody but add their little shake, somebody add their little rhythm here. Somebody might say something that's offbeat, and they might say something like, "No," and then somebody will challenge it, like, "No, this is my perspective on that." And then, like, okay, I see that. That makes sense to me. And the attempt is to still come to this oneness, to gather sort of momentum and conjure up these sort of portals still through conversation that is mirroring what happened when we drum. That is all about just community building. It's about relationship building, and allowing us to remove sort of the I don't know the chatter from our minds by focusing on something and then connecting to other people that are doing the same thing and doing it with African cultural stuff. It's just there's a power in medicine that is unreplaceable for me.
What other tools are you using that that are linked to African tradition? What else? There's drumming, and I mean,
Um,
I'm very moved to hear
we
what you're
also
doing
do
with
a
drumming.
we do a comedic yoga before the drumming. I have a session every Sunday. It's free, open to the community. We do comedic yoga where we're doing poses where we're moving, breathing, but also saying the names of like comedic gods and goddesses, Asar and Aset and Newt, and like there's still an invocation that happens where a man can come and think that no, this is white girl stuff, and I gotta have like leggings on to do this, but we get to reclaim it, not have it be Eastern or have it be New Age, but this is what we have always done, and the power of reconnecting to those things that were supposed to be taken off from us, like just elevates the magnitude of the healing, right? It just fortifies it in a way that if we were just doing regular yoga, whatever that means, or if we were just just talking, like some of this trauma we got to sweat out, like it's in our blood and bones and our DNA. We got to move it out, we got to shake it out. So moving modalities, dancing, I use a lot of hip hop, drums. I bring a lot of like multimedia clips in because I work with a lot of young people. So and their attention span is just shot. So like I gotta keep shiny stuff. I always gotta play clips from TV, from movies, whatever it is. YouTube. I'm on YouTube a lot, just showing images and all that kind of stuff. So it's a mixed media. It's a dynamic. It's like try to hit on all the different spots because talking does is talking is good. We gotta talk, but like sometimes you gotta not talk. Sometimes the therapy is not talking at all. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's being in nature. Sometimes it's sitting by the lake. Sometimes it's just listening to yourself. Um, all of it. I do all of it. I bring all of it into the space.
And how do you incorporate writing in that? How do you get writing to be part of that process, the healing process? I mean.
The easiest way for the boys is to use rap. So we listen to music, but then I ask them to tell their story through rapping it, through rhyming. Everybody thinks they're gonna be a rapper, and there's something really powerful about rap as a medium because, like, I can ask a boy, "Tell me your story, what you've been up to, what's been happening," and they'll get stuck. Like they won't be able to express it. But for some reason, they can rap things that they can't say out loud. And so that's one of the things that I use the most is to get them to use poetry or rhymes to tell a story, and when they do that, they're able to be more vulnerable in ways um, that they wouldn't do if they were just journaling. But I do encourage journaling, and sometimes I create space just to write, not even like full sentences. Sometimes I just just put the pen down and write the same word over and over again, or scribble, or do it, but just have a conversation with yourself to document this thing that you're feeling and allow a space to a cathartic space to do it. But it's hard to do because I mean they're not reading, they're not writing. All of it's hard, but I try to encourage as much as I can.
Okay. When you're using rap and they're using rap and they're attempting to rap, Do they ever try to
Mhm.
mimic the more mainstream approach to rap, which I, I mean, for me, it's kind of similar to what happens with dancehall and even to some extent
Yeah.
with soca music, which is, there's a kind of misogynistic tone to it from time to
Yeah.
time.
I mean, by the time, if they know me and we have established a culture, they know
Mm-hmm.
what I like and what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't get that much of that. But when it happens, we still talk about it. Like it's still
Right.
fine.
That's what I was wondering.
Um,
Do you talk about it, and can they articulate why they would adopt those stances and why those stances ought not to be adopted? I guess.
once if we talk through it after a while, but immediately no, because they just it's just what it is. They're just
Mm-hmm.
used to digesting it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I play hip hop, it's not just like the positive, cultural, or conscious stuff. I ask them what they're listening to. Tell me what you listen to, and then we'll print those lyrics out line by line. Talk about why do you like that? You like the song? That's your favorite song?
Mm.
Tell me what you like about that. Then they have to engage and explain what do you like about a thing. And if I can look at lines that are encouraging, particularly if I've been with them for a while and I know their personal life that they've been impacted by mass incarceration. Their parents been locked up. I ain't never met my father. They got people in their family that's been addicted. People may have been shot. And so I know in their personal life they've been impacted by some of these themes that come out in the lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
And then they say, "This is my favorite song. I like this."
Mm.
I can now juxtapose that. Or you like this thing that you just told me caused you pain and trauma. What is it now? Now I get to ask a deeper question. What does it mean to like a thing?
Mm.
Do you like it just popular? Do you like
Mm.
because it? I mean, do you really actually like it, or are you just like going through it,
Is it
or is it
resonating?
just
Is it resonating with you? Or are you liking it because everybody else is saying that this is popular and this is the thing to like?
for the most part it's connected to money? I mean, it's really just really about success.
Mm.
So I mean, when they write a thing that they think people would listen to, if they be honest and because rappers don't have the courage to demonstrate the range of life that they've experienced. So
Mm.
even if they're keeping it real, even if they really live that life and they describe it sometimes, they also got parents and kids and wives and they don't talk about that stuff. And so when I encourage a young person to be honest, tell your full story, like for real, they think it's corny because they're not used to seeing that. So I do got to show a range of artists that are talking about all of these things, but there's still a connection to the certain things that are popular and make money and are more likely to be played on the radio or get spins or get endorsements, whatever it is. So then once we go there, I can connect that to these bigger systems we've been talking about. And I can say, you like this, let's go look at the CEO of the record company that produces this.
Mm.
I can show how these corporations that are not suffering from the things that they're talking about, that they making money off of you suffering from it, and they sending their kids to college because of it, and all of them are white. And so now I can show this. I can teach systems analysis using the music that they're listening to, and now connect their hatred of the police with something that they directly put into their earbuds and support with their money that's causing at least as much damage. And now we're thinking about a whole nother thing. Now we're thinking, now we're talking, now we engage. Now when they hear that song again, they're like, oh, okay. That's what he was talking about. When I ask them what their favorite song is and I pull the lyrics out and I tell them to read it out loud and there's an elder woman in the room and they can't say that word in front of a woman
Mm-hmm.
and like that is sometimes the first time it occurred to them what that word was, what that line was,
Mm-hmm.
what it meant. They're not even thinking about it. So that's what we're doing. We just got to pause and get them to think and engage critically, and then they'll figure it out. They'll do it. They will do it on their own
But
and see the contradictions.
mm-hmm.
Mhm.
No, go ahead. Continue, Dad. Because when you're finished with that, there's something I want to ask you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they will see the contradictions. We just have to like put it in front of them and lay it out so they can be like, oh, white people are promoting this. He's not really telling the truth, right? Hip hop got this myth of keeping it real,
Mm.
and if I can show he's been lying the whole time, he don't really do the drugs he say he do.
Mm.
He just saying it to you, and the ones that are doing it sometimes in the last couple of years are overdosing from it. You like that? What do you mean you like that? What do you like about that? We just have to have the conversation and allow the space. It's important to not be preachy, to not go in there and be like, they saying the N word and be, because you disconnect it. But if we just openly say, okay, what are you into? What do you like? Let them play it, and give them critically engaging skills. I think they run with it. I've seen that they will run with it. They will show me things that I hadn't even seen before. They will break down stuff because we talk about smart people. Like these are genius kids that have just been not given opportunity to flourish that part of themselves. They encouraged to entertain or to be athletics, but not to cultivate their inherent genius. So when they get a moment to do that, using something that they like, it's stimulating to them that they want to do more and more of. Has been my experience.
How are you getting them to rethink what
Hmm.
success means? Because for centuries success is linked to money and wealth and acquisition of
Yeah.
things. So how are you
Yeah.
navigating conversations about success and defining success?
Um, I think that the thing that's been most successful about that particular conversation, and it's a difficult one, is um, getting them to define what they want for their children. Fatherhood has been my most successful angle at redefining all of these characteristics. What do you want for your children? And all of them, every father I've ever asked wants their children to read, to be healthy, to be safe, to be happy, to have joy, to be able to travel, like very simple human things. And when they describe that version of wellness and I connect that to success, then we get to talk about ways you can do that that aren't connected to um, material things that aren't necessarily dependent upon money. And then on top of that, to associate money, at least greed in this way, with the same thing that got us to this place. Um, it just it breaks up some of the like particularly men don't like to feel like they're losing, that they fell for the okey doke. And once I show that like you seem strong. Like this is really, it's really confusing in prison. Like it'll be like the so-called gangbangers. They be tatted up, they be swole, but then some other little kid tells them, blows a whistle, and then they got to turn the lights off and go to sleep. Some other man is telling you when to eat. Right? That's not. There's nothing successful about that. It's not manly. It's not strong. Like we just, it's really just putting the pieces together and showing them that the world that as it is allows another man to win and you and your family to suffer for generations. And that the way they've defined success has you buying into the things that prop them up still. So that's part of it. Like one of it's like just disrupting the whole thing and making them feel like, oh wait, I'm losing. I don't want that. And my children will lose. And making it almost goofy to like want Prada and Gucci as a sign of a trinket that I've made it, and they are making more money off of it, and we still suffering. Like these dynamics are things that most men never think about. We just rotating and on a sort of hamster wheel. But it's important to just pause, think about it, expose it, look at the contradictions, and again, they put these pieces together. I pull them apart, and then they'll put them back together in a way that's like, wait, that don't even feel good no more. That's not what I want. Um, so all that. I mean, and it's a long drawn out. Like it just there's ways to do it. There's dynamics. There's group dynamics. You got to make sure the space is right. And sometimes I don't get invited back because I'm talking like this in front of
But
a warden.
do they make the
Like, there's all
connections?
these things.
Do they make the connections between materialism and how materialism has them trapped in a particular cycle, and just, I guess, basically it involved in more toxic behavior?
I mean, I think that most of the time people understand what I'm saying.
Okay.
They can make that connection, but don't necessarily carry it home. It doesn't necessarily translate into their real life.
Okay.
So that's where we lose. Like people can get it and like, okay, that makes sense. That's not good for the kids, but it won't necessarily make them change their behavior because we have not created systems of compensation where they can get work in other places.
Yeah, there are no
I can tell
alternatives.
you
There are no
there's no
alternatives.
alternative,
Yeah.
right? So it's a good
Gotcha.
idea, and we all know Doc is smart. You know what he's talking about. That's real shit. But then that's it. That'd be the end of it.
Yeah.
So that's why we're losing because we're losing because of infrastructure and organization.
Okay. Obari, thank you so much for your time this evening. I know I told you
No problem.
I'd take an hour out of your life, and you've given me that hour very calmly at that. So thank you so much for making time for us, and at some point in time, we're going to have you back.
I love it. Thank
All
you for
right.
having me.
Take care. Bye.
Okay.
So, folks, there you have it. That was Dr. Obari Cartman talking about an alternative form of mental wellness, self care for Black persons, using things from your own cultural traditions to be able to center yourself and heal yourself and be able to find balance. So, I hope you all have a good evening. On Friday, I'll be right back here, so join me on Friday and we're going to have yet another very interesting discussion. I hope you all enjoyed the conversation this evening. Bye.